Terry Turchie retired from the FBI in April 2001, having served as the first Deputy Assistant Director of the newly created Counterterrorism Division of the FBI from March 2000 to April 2001. Between 1994 and 98, Terry directed the Unabomb task force. You remember that identified and arrested Theodore Kaczynski for his 18-year-long string of terrorist bombings. Terry Turchie is a recipient of the FBI's Director's Award, as well as the Attorney General's Award for Distinguished Service. He frequently speaks to corporate and law enforcement groups, but far more importantly than that, he's talking to you and us right now. Terry Turchie, welcome to Outsiders. How are you?
Thank you, Rowan. I'm fine. And Rita and James, thank you all for having me. I really appreciate it. We have a lot to talk about.
We certainly do. So can you just get straight into what you think Black Lives Matter and Antifa are all about? Where do they come from and why are people getting down on their knees to them, literally? What are they? Who are they, Terry?
Well, this is all too familiar, Rowan, to FBI agents who worked the Weather Underground and the Black Panther Party back in the 1960s and in the 1970s. And the FBI had a major effort then against both of those groups, those organizations, because the Black Panther Party was actually tied to at least 36 murders of police officers across the country. It had a 10-point plan, and essentially its 10-point plan was the same plan that today Black Lives Matter is pushing. And no one has read what Black Lives Matter has written as far as their plan and their charter, but it bears a great similarity to what the Black Panther Party was saying back then. The Black Panther Party was a Marxist Maoist Leninist organization, and that came from Huey Newton, one of the co-founders. He gave a speech in 1970 at Boston College, and he said, "We're standing for nothing more than the total transformation," very important two words there, the total transformation of the United States government and America. And he went on to explain that what we want to do is take the tension that already exist in Black communities and exasperate it where we can, maybe create situations if we need to, but take those situations where there's a tinderbox and literally light the country on fire. What would be the issue? The issue would be police racism, police brutality. This is back in the 1960s and early 70s. And so today we're seeing that same thing. Let's cross over for a minute to the Weather Underground. Weather Underground was headed by a guy named Bill Ayers. The Weather Underground was responsible for over 2,000 bombings of federal facilities, attacks on police officers, government installations. They had an explosion, in fact, one time in Greenwich Village. It killed some of their own people. It was a bomb factory in the middle of the city of New York. So they don't care a whole lot about people's safety. What they care about is this. And this is why this makes no sense, what is going on today, because those of us who have a logical brain and think of things rationally would never think about this, but to them it makes a lot of sense. Today we're seeing the third revolution. They tried for the second revolution back in the 60s and 70s. Today they think they can make this happen. And that's why Eric Holder, even in an interview a few years ago, said it's time for a third revolution in America. So you can see that all of these things are building, and the same issues that the Weather Underground advocated and put in its Prairie Fire Manifesto, a terror manifesto which was aimed at overthrowing the government of the United States, is now what we're seeing play out today. The only thing that's different are the names of the groups, the personalities. But interestingly, there's a great difference today, a major difference, and that is today they have essentially taken the inside. They have integrated the philosophy of the Weather Underground and the Black Panther Party into the Democratic Party, the mainstream of it. And I'll give you one example, and then I'll just stop for a minute. The Weather Underground and the Black Panther Party hated capitalism. Of course, if you read the CPUSA, the Communist Party of the United States manifestos and websites, they hate capitalism too. The Soviet Union, the old Soviet Union, the current Russia, the Chinese, they all hate capitalism. So do these people. AOC made a comment not too long ago. She said, capitalism is irredeemable. Bernie Sanders ran for years, ran twice, on the idea that it's time for a political revolution and capitalism doesn't work. And what you're seeing now is people on the outside who are kind of violent. I mean, I know they call these peaceful protests, but Gosh, can you imagine if we'd had arsons and looting and vandalism every time there was a Tea Party protest? So there's a whole standard that's different now. This is the outside. This is the violent part. On the inside, the Democratic Party is ready to take what is happening here and say, look, all Americans believe this. It's time to get rid of capitalism. It's time to force on you climate change. It's time to change your entire economic, political, and while we're at it, your religious structure and your free speech and your Bill of Rights and everything else. And that's what this is really about.
Rita.
And it's not just the Democrats that this mentality exists in. It's the overwhelming majority of the media and increasingly the big corporates. They have backed Black Lives Matters publicly. And there's a lot of questions now about where does the funding go? Can you illuminate us at all about where the millions that's pouring into this organisation, where does that go? How is that used?
Rita, that's a great question. And that's what really bothers a lot of former FBI agents and shows how weak our position is right now. Back when the Weather Underground and the Black Panther Party were exercising their campaign of terror and bombings and explosions, in the aftermath of that, guess who was really punished? The FBI. The FBI had its domestic terrorism or its domestic intelligence capability eliminated. We were told to stop doing anything with local police to keep track of organizations like this. And so today, and then we got COINTELPRO, where we got in a lot of trouble on because that's the tactics and methods we use to kind of identify and do the kind of things you just asked, to try to find out who's involved in these kinds of movements and who's funding them. And so back then we knew we could get a jump start on going after these organizations, going after specific people, and we could explain what was happening. Today, we have no idea. Think about it. You're living, or if you're living in the United States and you're living in Seattle, and you turn on the news, you see that one of your precincts has been essentially surrounded, then it's abandoned. Then you find out a city council member has let the protesters into a public building. And then the next thing you know is they've taken over a part of town. And then you read an article in the paper saying law enforcement doesn't really know who these people are. That's pretty scary. Sure. And that shows you how much we don't know.
James.
So I'm really glad that you mentioned Bill Ayers before, because I think that this is an absolutely fascinating link to this. How much has the Democratic Party been taken over by this ideology? Because, of course, Bill Ayers was one of Barack Obama's political mentors. Eric Holder was, as you said, very much as part of this program. And Barack Obama promised a fundamental transformation of American life. How much, A, has the Democratic Party been taken over by this radical ideology? And B, how much is this broader woke culture that's supporting it? You said that part of the ideology of the Weather Underground is about dethroning God. How much of this has now become a substitute religion for people in America who just need something to believe in, and they've taken up this far-left cause?
I think, first of all, most of this is still preached by a minority of people. And even though we saw literally hundreds of thousands, let's say hundreds of thousands of people in the street, there are 320 million people in America. I think the vast majority of white and black and Hispanic Americans and Asian Americans look at this and wonder what is happening, and they don't buy into any of it. But then you get into something else. You get into the fear factor. And that is what prompts a lot of these corporations and a lot of people, certainly a lot of people living in parts of town that are disturbed by this and see these lootings and vandalism and arson. They don't know what to do. They're not getting any guidance from their government. They hear no answers. And so they start responding by, maybe if I'm nice, maybe if I apologize, because I don't think people should be racist either. But that's not what this is about. This is racism used as an issue to spark the revolution. It is meant and it is intended to be divisive and to divide the country. And that goes to the heart of what the Weather Underground wanted. The Weather Underground, to get into some of the comparisons, the Weather Underground in their Prairie Fire Manifesto called their strategy for revolution resistance. What did the Democratic Party do within hours of Donald Trump being elected? They started lining up behind their strategy, which was going to be resistance. in the 2016 Democratic Party platform before they ever thought they would lose. In fact, they thought they would never think they would have lost that election. If you start going through that platform, you see integrated into it all of the language that you're hearing now. Long before what we had happened, a terrible tragedy in Minnesota occurred, but these things were being built, or the structure was being built to take advantage of these types of terrible strategies or tragedies long before this. And if you take the platform, the Democratic Party platform, you can see the whole idea of systemic racism and systemic police racism throughout. If you look at the Weather Underground platform, that's the main issue throughout that platform. Systemic racism, institutional racism, police racism, not with any evidence. Yep. So, and it goes on. In this book we wrote about a year and a half ago that just came out, we predicted this. And the reason we wrote it is that my co-author, Don Bracken, is a historian. And we were talking one day, and I said, I'm checking myself with other retired agents, but this is looking more and more like what we were about to see happen in the 70s and 60s. So we thought about it. We wrote this book in their own words, The Democratic Party's Push for a Communist America. And we started comparing these documents, the Weather Underground Prairie Fire Manifesto, the Black Panther Party 10-point plan, the Communist Party of the USA website, the Democratic Socialists of America website and their platforms,
Terry?
And the Black Panther Party.
Terry, we're going to put that book up on the screen. I urge people to read it in their own words by Terry Turchie. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, Terry, but there it is, and I urge people to buy that book and read it. It's absolutely fascinating, and thank you so much, Terry Turchie. We'll get you back again to explain just the links between what we are seeing, Black Lives Matter, Antifa, and the mad, crazy Marxists of the 70s. Thanks so much, Terry Turchie.
Thank you all. Thank you very much.